Hello and thanks for joining us on Encore Cinema Show. Coming up, Borg McEnroe takes a shot at one of the greatest tennis rivalries in history. Algeria's past and present take flight in Until the Birds Return, and a French filmmaker pulls at the seams of America's social fabric in We Blew It.
It's the perfect rivalry. The baseline player and the net rusher.
We were just the center of the universe. And then that moment passed.
And for more on what you just heard, we're joined by France 24's resident critic and encyclopedia of film, Lisa Nesselson. Thanks for being with us, Lisa. Now, we're starting with a new release, Borg McEnroe. The film takes us back to the 80s, to a time when tennis players were catapulted to rock star status and people were interested in their lives off the court just as much as they were on the court.
I enjoyed this movie from start to finish. It's set in 1980 when the title individuals played their hearts out at Wimbledon to settle the question of which one was the best tennis player in the whole wide world. I tend to appreciate films where real-life characters speak the language they would have spoken at the time. Here's Bjorn Borg speaking both Swedish and English. He speaks Swedish with his coach and his girlfriend, for example. And John McEnroe sputters and fumes and carries on and generally behaves badly. Sounds like a template for a certain head of state. Borg is the cool customer and McEnroe is the talented brat. But as we learn in intelligently presented flashbacks, the two men have more in common than just athletic talent. It was a time of wooden rackets, strategy, and stamina, and the brash young American was not shy about expressing his opinions back when being verbally inconsiderate was unacceptable. Let's watch.
Listen to those jeers. I can't remember a single Wimbledon match where the crowd has made this much noise.
Excuse me?
It wasn't on this side of the line, Mr.
How?
McEnroe.
The chalk flew up.
The ball has been ruled out.
Excuse me?
It was a good call. It was a bit of a scramble.
You can't be serious. You cannot be serious.
It was a
the
good
ball was on the
decision.
line. Chalk flew up all over, man. The chalk flew up.
Feels like I'm really looking at McEnroe there. The actors are spot on in this film, Lisa, and it's always difficult to take on such public figures. They've done a good job here. What do you think?
They have. This film is beautifully cast. In fact, young Bjorn Borg from ages 9 through 13 is played by one Leo Borg, age 14, who happens to be the real-life son of the tennis great. Iceland-born Sverrir Gudnason is absolutely perfect as Borg. You sort of have to rub your eyes. Shia LaBeouf is terrific as McEnroe, and Stellan Skarsgård is superb as Borg's coach. We come away with an appreciation of just how important a coach can be at this rarefied level. I think the film does a very good job of translating the pressure of high-level athletics, the nitty-gritty of a rivalry that the press just cannot get enough of. And tennis has been described as a gentleman's sport, and we can feel the wound when young Bjorn, who comes from a modest family, is told that he doesn't really fit into the rarefied world of Swedish tennis because, quote, tennis isn't a sport for all social classes. And McEnroe has his own demons to exorcise through exercise. What'll it be? Gentleman or rebel, Iceborg, or super brat? I found this a thrilling piece of filmmaking.
The yin and yang of tennis world.
Absolutely.
Right there. Well, from Wimbledon in the 80s to Algeria today, Lisa, Until the Birds Return. That's out this week in France, and it's been getting some great reviews. What's your verdict?
I saw this just last week at the Vienna International Film Festival, and I was so wrapped up in the movie's three-pronged portrait of the challenges and frustrations of living in contemporary Algeria that I was literally discombobulated when I left the cinema and went, oh wait, I'm not in Algeria, I'm on a chilly street in Vienna. This is an involving, brave, important film. It's a Franco-Algerian co-production and a fine example of how French money, French producers help nurture new talent and keep world cinema alive. Now I call it three-pronged because there are actually three stories, but we don't know that when they start watching. They just sort of meld into each other without warning. What permeates all three sections, I would say, is the fallout from sectarian violence in the 1990s that tore Algeria apart, and the fallout of religious pressure here and now. A huge proportion of the people in Algeria are under age 30, and they don't really have much to do with their energy and their talent. In the first story, an architect with an ex-wife and a younger second wife witnesses a violent incident that would prompt most of us to call the police, but our protagonist takes another path. In the second story, one of his employees takes time off to drive a woman to her wedding in another town, and the tension between them is beautifully modulated when they stop over at a hotel. Let's take a look.
That dancing is contagious, Lisa, and it shows that you don't always need lusty dialogue or even bare skin to fog up the big screen, as we've just seen there.
Yes, it's playful, and yet it's very sensual and suggestive, and you don't need dialogue. It's not exactly John Travolta and Uma Thurman, because there's an aching quality to it that makes it much richer than that. The final segment deals with the fallout from a rape in time of war. This movie has really stuck with me, and as Karim Mouassi has already proved with a masterful short film, I'd say he's definitely a talent to watch.
Now, from the fallout of fear and repression, as we've just seen there, to the consequences, Lisa, of freewheeling freedom, and you're getting your props ready here for the big reveal of this one. The French documentary, now, We Blew It, is a 2-hour and 17-minute long documentary by Jean-Baptiste Thoret, an author and professor who was also a film critic for Charlie Hebdo for 17 years. It sounds pretty ambitious, Lisa.
It's very ambitious, very, very ambitious. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, far from it, I think a slightly less rambling structure would probably have paid greater dividends. Now, there is a long, long tradition of French people visiting the U.S. and examining it and studying it, starting with this guy, Mr. Alexis de Tocqueville. And, of course, like all Americans, I'm never without a copy of this. I go with it everywhere. That was fake news. The unfettered openness of American society has fascinated French filmmakers for a very long time. Thoret conducted in-depth interviews with a wonderful range of accomplished filmmakers who really made their mark in the 60s and 70s. Peter Bogdanovich, Bob Rafelson, Jerry Schatzberg, Paul Schrader, James Toback, etc. It's a dream list of talented people. And he includes a lot of interviews with regular people who lived through that era, and lots and lots and lots of beautifully framed shots of small, slightly decaying or abandoned American towns and the open road. He is drunk on the iconography of Route 66. The result is a film about America, but terminally French in its approach. It's way too long, way too diffuse, diluted by these self-indulgent pageants, but worth seeing because there are many, many kernels of observation here that remain fascinating because they were put together by a very smart foreigner looking in. Here's American director Michael Mann explaining some of the reasons why American discourse has devolved over the past 40 years.
I had spent 6 years out of the United States, and I probably was out of the United States for maybe a year or too long. I really should have come back around 1969. If you drove down the road past a ranch in Nebraska and stopped and talked to a rancher and asked him what he thought about what was going on in the cities, you were engaging in a 2-hour conversation. This was substantial stuff. It makes the current debate between Clinton and Trump superficial and small and tiny.
Now, we got a bit of a sense of this from Michael Mann just now, but Lisa, why the title, We Blew It?
Well, that comes from Easy Rider, the industry-changing independent film co-starring Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper that put Jack Nicholson on the map and truly had the whole nation talking back in 1969. The character played by Fonda tells Hopper toward the end, "We blew it, man." Thoret finished shooting, oddly enough, just 3 weeks before the last U.S. presidential election. So the film ends up asking, how did we get from Easy Rider to Trump. My feeling is that you can be a crystal meth addict in Appalachia and still see whether somebody is qualified or unqualified. But in We Blew It, Torre attempts to look at the roots of how America went from looking its problems square in the face and questioning authority to tens of millions of people falling for fake news. 1968 to 1975 was a pretty magnificent era in American filmmaking.
Now, Lisa, Torre interviewed the Black American director Charles Burnett, who was one of the 4 recipients this week of an honorary Oscar, along with Donald Sutherland and director Owen Roizman, and a French director who's often called the godmother of the New Wave.
Yes, and rightly so. At age 89, Agnes Varda is being honored by the Academy. Now, Varda has been known to be roughly as gracious as the young John McEnroe, but she stated that she's flattered, but really not all that much because this isn't a real Oscar. They're giving it to her now and not next year, etc., etc. She's wrong about that, and there is absolutely no denying her phenomenal creative output over the past 60 years. Varda started out as a photographer and has never stopped innovating and embracing new technology. Her filmography is a wonderful blend of fiction and first-person essay films, and the common denominator is that absolutely no one else could have made any of them. She is an artist through and through. Faces Places, which she co-crafted with a giant mural photographer, JR, is currently making the rounds of the planet. In 2000, she was one of the first to use a video camera to make an absolutely brilliant essay called The Gleaners and I. She recorded the explosion of feminism in the 1970s, made a wonderful film about becoming an artist, about her late husband, Jacques Demy, and my favorite of her films is probably Cleo from 5 to 7, which follows the title character, a beautiful, self-centered singer, as she wanders through Paris waiting for the results of a medical test.
Well, we're going to share your coup de coeur. We're going to give you a little snippet of that film, but first I have to thank you very much, Lisa, for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and expertise. I hope you all enjoyed the program. Do remember our website and connect with us on social media. There's more news coming up on France 24 right after this. Here's Cleo from 5 to 7.